Welcome back, everybody. Ready? Okay,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
great.
Yes.
All right, tonight's title is They Control Everything. And it's really to bring into focus many of the claims and assertions that I've made thus far. And as we did last night, I try to let the people that are involved with these events in the world to speak for themselves, and tonight will be no exception. So I'm going to kneel and pray silently as usual, and then we'll dive into the message. Let's bow our heads. Thank you, Father, for hearing our prayer. Thank you for your promise to never leave us and to always be by our side. I ask for the Holy Spirit to give me your words and your tone. And I ask for your angels to protect us and to abide with us in this room. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so they control everything. And let's see what that's all about. We know what this series' objectives are. They're to understand God's warning in Revelation 14, verses 6 through 19, and to prepare for that. We know that this final warning in Revelation 14 is centered around worship. And we know that God is calling his people out of Babylon in the second angel's message. It looks like a couple of my slides got flipped around. So Revelation 14 raises a lot of questions, and one of our objectives in this series is to answer as many of those questions as possible. I think we've hit the worship subject over and over and over again, and for good reason, because that is the center topic. That's the central topic when God is dealing with his people, because our natural tendency is to wander off and worship ourselves, or worship some object, or worship our spouse, or worship our children, our job, or whatever, because worship comes in the form of what occupies our time, our resources, and our mind, and our heart. It's not necessarily a matter of liturgy, which is process. Most people think of worship as going through forms of bowing and doing this or that, or penance, or whatever the case may be. But God wants the kind of worship that comes from our heart. He wants our mind, and he wants our heart. And that's really what's at issue. So let's do a little bit of review. We have the harlots from last night's message, which are American Protestantism. Because as we know, we identified the whore of Babylon in Revelation as being apostate pagan religion. We covered last night that it's basically sun worship. And we saw how in the symbology it moved through all the pagan kingdoms and basically just moved straight into papal Rome. We saw the various sun gods from Medo-Persia, from Babylon, from Egypt. They all had the sun halo behind the head with the rays. The mythology of Isis, Horus, and Set from Egypt, in other words, the mother and child symbol. All these things just sort of moved into the Christian church at the onset of the Dark Ages. And basically what had happened was that Christianity was under fire from pagan Rome. And persecution was high, but it seemed that the higher that persecution rose, the more the church grew. So Satan couldn't destroy the church from without. He had to try to destroy it from within. Right? Because with every martyr, every time they threw a Christian into the lines, 10 more Christians would spring up. And they just couldn't kill the church. Satan could not accomplish his goals that way. And as we know, the best way to defeat an organization or a nation is to divide and conquer it from within. So what happened was the Emperor Constantine realized that this was the case. He realized he needed to form an alliance between pagan Rome and Christian Rome, as it were. And so what happened was the two religions sort of married in order to appease both groups. The Christian church adopted idol worship and took on a second day of worship. Initially, the church worshipped on Saturday, the Sabbath, and on Sunday, because Sunday was the day of the sun god, and the Romans worshipped the sun god. And so there was this merger between the two. The church was happy not to be under persecution anymore, so they made compromises and brought in the idol worship and the sun worship. And pagan Rome adopted some of the symbology of Christianity to appease Christianity. So we had this strange, unholy marriage between two religious paradigms. Constantine had his army march through a river and said, "Now you're all baptized." According to Constantine, he had a vision in the clouds of a cross, and he was told to conquer under that symbol. If he really did have that vision, I assure you it was not from God. Anyway, so this is how the churches, the two religions, merged initially. As time went on, they began to worship on Sabbath less, and they began to appease the majority, which were pagans, for sun worship more and more. They made Saturday a day of fasting, so it was not very pleasant for people. And as time went on, they just sort of eliminated the Sabbath worship, and they exclusively worshiped on Sunday. And that was the evolution that took place. And before you know it, Constantine moves the throne from Europe to Eastern Roman Empire. Of course, we know the history. We covered that before. Before you know it, the Bishop of Rome, or the head of this new Christian pagan hybrid, took the seat in Rome as both a religious and civil leader. And so that's basically how it went from two very divided paradigms into a homogenization of the two. So let's move on. As we said last night, God has his people in all churches. The harlots are the offspring of the mother church, the whore of Babylon, the Roman Catholic system. As I said last night, this is about the organization and not the people that are within. God has his people in all churches. So let's move on. We've got a lot to cover, so let's just do a quick review of last night. The Pope claims to be God on earth and claims to have the power to change God's times and laws. This is according to his own words. It's on the handout. And it'll be on the video on YouTube. The change of the Sabbath from the seventh day Saturday to the first day of the week, though not found in the Bible, is found in the official documentation of the Vatican, the beast power. The beast papal power claims that the change is her mark of authority. This stands in direct contrast to God's seal, the seventh day Sabbath. And that word mark is directly from their quote. It's their words. So we have the beast as identified in Revelation 13, claiming their mark of authority is the change of the day of worship. And remember, in Revelation 14, we have two separate paradigms here. We have two separate worship paradigms. One is worship the Creator, which is Jehovah in heaven. They're the sheep. They're the wheat. They are the saints. Then we have another group which will take on the mark of the beast. In other words, In their form of worship, they will not be worshiping the Creator. It says that they will receive the mark in the hand or in the forehead. Notice the word or. In other words, as I've said before, Satan doesn't care if you believe what you're doing. He just wants to make sure you're breaking the commandments. A good example is in Daniel 3, where the Hebrew boys had the opportunity to save their skin by bowing before the image. That would have broken the second commandment, which says, don't bow down to idols. So we have history repeating itself in the very near future, and it's once again around worship. Do we worship the Creator or do we not? To keep it simple. The Catholic Church, in their quotes, actually mocks the Protestant world for acknowledging her authority by recognizing this change in their theology. I have many more quotes from the church at home. If you want to give me your email, I can send them to you. Sun worship practices of Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome have been inherited by the Roman Church and incorporated in their liturgy. And we saw all the symbology. It's very clear that the trend of worship moved through all these kingdoms and was inherited by the papal system. And it was because of that merger between the two religious paradigms in the early years of the papal rule, I should say. About the same time the first beast receives the deadly wound, which was in the late 1700s, the second beast, that is the United States, rises out of the earth, which represents sparse population in contrast to the seas and the waters, which is dense population. Keep in mind that as we go through the nations in prophecy, we move from east to west. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, controlling Europe. The only kingdom to the west of that is in North America. So there's this movement from east to west, along with many other things that God gives us in the unfolding of prophecy that point us to where we should look. About number 7 here. The second beast, the United States, initially has lamb-like qualities, acknowledging the existence of both church and state as separate. This second beast had 2 horns like a lamb representing Christ, the 2 horns being civil and religious liberty, are the 2 pillars of our nation, of our country. But then it eventually speaks like a dragon, which is representing Satan and his virtues. Moving on, she initially cherishes high morals, family values, Christian values, etc., etc. Her people initially generally frowned upon immorality, profanity, sexual deviance, and felt they must answer to God for their choices. That was our roots. That was the characteristic of our nation and our culture. We had our problems, no doubt about it. I wouldn't use the word pure to describe this nation in the early years, but generally speaking, we had these family-centered values, and we generally felt like we needed to answer to God, certainly much more so than today. But these American lamb-like qualities are being replaced with dragon-like qualities, just as prophecy says would be the case. Perversion, profanity, Satanism, extreme violence, mocking Jesus are considered acceptable entertainment by her people. I mean, you just turn on the TV and they're mocking Christ every other minute. It's just a common phenomenon. Through American Protestantism, Satan will work to move Washington to pass legislation that will become oppressive to commandment-keeping Christians. And we saw websites and comments from organizations that are pushing for this even now and have been for quite some time. Under the Trump administration, the Johnson Amendment, I believe it's called, which strengthens that wall between church and state, he either abolished it or was attempting to abolish it. My memory fails me. But the trend is in in the direction of redefining what the separation of church and state should be. Because among the leading Protestant organizations, there is a strong feeling that we need to get back to God, and that's true as far as individuals. But legislating this is not how God works. God does not legislate obedience. He makes an appeal, and he asks us to choose him. It is Satan's way to legislate and to force. And what we're seeing among American Protestantism and the Catholic Church as well, working together, remember we're talking about the mother and the harlots, working together are pushing for a legal day of rest. And it's shaped in such a way that people will embrace it gladly unless they know what we're talking about in this series, which is part of the reason for this series. Because if you don't understand what's behind all this, it's going to look like a great idea. And initially it will be a great idea for all intents and purposes. It's just that unless you know what's going on, unless you've seen the information revealed in this series and others like it, you will not realize that it's basically a Trojan horse. It's something that's just going to move in, and at some point it's going to become oppressive. So through Babylon's harlots, that's apostate Protestantism, false miracles, and doctrines will be used by Satan to deceive the masses. They will fulfill Christ's prophecy in John 16. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. It can't be deceptive. It doesn't look Christian. Okay, so that was a long review, but it was important to understand how this beast system has its tentacles into everything, and tonight we're going to look at the evidence. The Hegelian dialectic, they have a fancy definition here. An interpretive method in which the contradiction between a proposition, thesis, and its antithesis is resolved at a higher level of truth synthesis. Let me interpret that, because I don't even understand what they're trying to say there. The Hegelian dialectic is this. You control, I'll put it in very easy terms that we can all relate to, that I can relate to. You control the left, you control the right, without anybody knowing that you control both sides. You pit one side against the other until the strife is so bad that the masses are willing to accept the solution you wanted to provide to begin with, but they would not have accepted had there not been the strife, and that's what synthesis is. Synthesis is when you have that compromise provided to remove the chaos and the stress. You see, the left and the right, conservative, liberal, however you want to define it, it's sort of like a fisherman. One's letting the fish out, one's bringing it in. But the objective is the same, and that's to get the fish in the boat. Right? And so that's what's happening. We push the pendulum way left until we're about to go nuts, and then we push the pendulum way right. And then we're about to go nuts, we push the pendulum way right, left a little bit further, and that's where we're at now. We've seen this cycle all our lives through the history of this nation. And now the pendulum is so far left that it resembles something insane. But remember, the same organizations control both sides. See, the left is anti-God. It is pro many things, and I'm not meaning to be political. I'm just stating it the way it is within the biblical context. It's in favor of abortion. And if you think about that, in the Bible it says, God says, I knew you when you were in your mother's womb. All right? A lot of implications in that statement. God sees life before you're born. So my point is we're so far to the left now, we're accepting communism, we're condemning somebody pointing out, yeah, that's a woman, that's a man. Joseph, you're a man. Did you know that? Now, but I'm in trouble because that's not acceptable anymore. Right? So you see that it's been pushed so far to the left that it resembles insanity. So what's the logical next step? Swing it back so it's so far to the right that the retaliation for what we're experiencing now will push it in a direction that we don't expect. And the problem in the Dark Ages was when religion and civil power were married. And so Satan pushes it this way and then that way and this way and that way, and that's what the Hegelian dialectic is about. It's about controlling both sides, and yeah, some of them do hate each other. It's like this, you've got a football team, you've got a quarterback, he does not like that wide receiver. When they're in the locker room, they're ready to go to blows. They hate each other, but when they're on the field, they have a common goal. That's to win the game. And it's going to become more clear as we see more information tonight. This is the Jesuit oath. You can find it online. This is one of the original copies that was made when it was on display in England in a museum, I believe. And we're going to read it. I've retyped it so that it's more visible on screen. The Jesuit order was founded for one reason, and that is to destroy Protestantism and to bring the world to submission to the papal rule. That is why they were formed. Plain and simple. Now, let's read their oath so we can get an idea of how they think and what their motives are. This is the candidate oath. I, so-and-so, John Smith, will say, now in the presence of Almighty God and the Blessed Virgin and Blessed Michael the Archangel, the Blessed Saint John the Baptist, the Holy Apostles Peter and Paul, and the saints, sacred hosts of heaven, and to you, my ghostly father, which is a reference to the general of the Jesuits, the superior general of the Society of Jesus, which is the Jesuits, founded by Ignatius Loyola in the pontification of Paul III, and that continued to the present, do by the womb of the Virgin, the matrix of God, and the rod of Jesus Christ, declare and swear that His Holiness the Pope is Christ's vice-regent and is the true and only head of the Catholic or Universal Church throughout the earth. A lot of verbiage at first, but it's going to get interesting. And that by the virtue of the keys of binding and loosing given to His Holiness by my Savior Jesus Christ, He hath power to depose heretical kings, princes, states, commonwealths, and governments. Did you catch that? He has the power, ostensibly, to depose heretical kings. You know what heresy is? Thinking for yourself. Heretical kings, princes, states, commonwealths, and governments, all being illegal without His sacred confirmation. Think about it. No government, no organization of significance is legal without the Pope's approval. That I will help and assist and advise all or any if His Holiness agents in any place wherever I shall be, and do my utmost to extirpate the heretical Protestant or liberal doctrines and to destroy all their pretended powers, legal or otherwise. That's their objective. That's why they exist, is to destroy Protestantism. It gets real interesting. I do further promise and declare that notwithstanding I am dispensed with to assume any religion heretical for the propagating of the Mother's Church's interests, to keep secret and private all her agents' counsels from time to time as they may instruct me, and not to divulge directly or indirectly by word, writing, or circumstances whatever. In other words, it's a very clandestine operation. It's not to be understood what's taking place. but to execute all that shall be proposed, given in charge, or discovered unto me by you, my ghostly father. Once again, the Jesuit general. Very wordy document here. It gets interesting. I do further promise and declare that I will have no opinion or will of my own, or any mental reservation whatever, even as a corpse or cadaver, but unhesitantly obey each and every command that I may receive from my superiors in the militia of the Pope and Jesus Christ. That I will go to any part of the world whatsoever without murmuring, and will be submissive in all things whatsoever communicated to me. I do further promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth. And that I will spare neither sex, age, nor condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs of the wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the wall, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. They actually did that. See, there was a group of Sabbath keepers called the Waldenses in Europe, northern Italy, I believe it was. If they discovered any of them, they would grab their children and grab them by the ankles and swing them against the wall to explode their skull into pieces, to get the parents to betray where the rest of the believers were. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poison cup, the strangulation cord, the steel of the poignard, that's a short dagger, I believe, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons whatsoever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. In confirmation of which I hereby dedicate my life, my soul, and my corporal powers, and with this dagger which I now receive, I will subscribe my name in blood, in my blood, in testimony thereof. That's a pretty serious oath.
Yeah, it says you're going to murder somebody.
Notice the severity of what they're willing to do, the extreme measures they're willing to take, and notice the secretive nature of this discourse. See, the Jesuits control the sovereign military order of Malta. It's easy to link to them. The Scottish Rite, Shriner Freemasonry. The Shriners have a great hospital that does a lot of good. It's a facade. You can't fool anybody by walking around with a machine gun in your hand. The Order of the Illuminati, that's most notable. The Knights of Columbus, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, B'nai B'rith, which is like a strange religion that homogenizes a bunch of different beliefs. The Nation of Islam and its private army called the Fruit of Islam. That's interesting because you see Muhammad was married to a nun. Recently, and you can Google this on the internet, the Pope was kissing a Quran, and often you'll see a cathedral and a mosque on the same property in some countries. The Mafia Commission, Opus Dei, and several other lesser brotherhoods, such as Skull and Bones, etc., etc. The Knights of Columbus politics. All the quotes are on the handout for tonight. The Knights of Columbus, founded at New Haven, Connecticut, February 2, 1882, by Reverend blah, 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 had on January 1, 1905, a total membership of 127,000. By the time that this was written here in 1912, 300,000 strong. I wonder how large it is now. See, the Knights of Columbus have their hands on a lot of interesting things. An Android Cleaver feature of this organization, to which Roman Catholics only are eligible, is the initiative service of 4 degrees. They work in collusion with the hierarchy and are the heart and soul in politics. You cannot be a high-level politician unless you pass muster with this organization, which is founded and controlled by the Jesuit order. Remember the secretive nature of that oath. If you want to control things on a high level, you cannot be directly related to it. You have to have deniability. We have nothing to do with that. This fact is well known to political machines and non-Catholic politicians, whose candidates must receive the approval of Rome and the Knights of Columbus before they dare nominate them for either dog pound or presidency. The Knights of Columbus' principal business is politics, a Jesuitical politics. The source is below and on the handout. Romanism, a menace to the nation. Jeremiah J. Crawley. Whoop. Knights of Malta. Headquartered in Rome, these Knights of Malta, of the papal Caesar, control the banking industry and military complexes of the world. They oversee Chase Manhattan Bank with branches in Moscow and in New York. They rule the international intelligence community, the KGB in the East and the CIA in the West. They're restoring the despotism of the Dark Ages. The book is The Knights of the Maltese Cross, Edith Simone, 1961. Confessions of an ex-Jesuit. I'm surprised he lived long enough to actually write this. The Jesuit order therefore stands before us as the embodiment of a system which aims at temporal political domination through temporal political means, embellished by religion, which assigns to the head of the Catholic religion the Roman Pope the role of a temporal overlord and under shelter of the Pope King, and using him as an instrument desires itself to attain dominion over the whole world. Count von Hohenzollern, 1911, German noble and ex-Jesuit. I'm sure he did not live much longer after he wrote that. Boast of a German general from the history of the Jesuits, Andrew Steinmetz, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Lee and Blancard, 1848, Volume 1. This is a Jesuit speaking. Jesuit general, the ghostly father. See, my lord, this, I don't know who he's talking to. See, my lord, from this room I govern not only Paris, but China. Not only China, but the whole world, without anyone knowing how it's managed. Speaking to the Duke of Brancas, I beg your pardon. He was boasting about the control he has over nations. This war would never have, this is a letter from Abraham Lincoln. This is a letter that Lincoln wrote. I don't know who the recipient was. This could be found online. This war would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to popery that we now see our land reddened with the blood of her noblest sons. Abraham Lincoln, 1865, 16th President of the United States. Lincoln's private letters burned by his son Roberts, restated by Charles Chiniquy. More from Lincoln. The Protestants of both the North and the South would surely unite to exterminate the priests and the Jesuits if they could learn how the priests, the nuns, and the monks which daily land on our shores, under the pretext of preaching their religion, are nothing else but the emissaries of the Pope, of Napoleon III, and other despots of Europe to undermine our institutions, alienate the hearts of our people from our Constitution and our laws, destroy our schools, and prepare a reign of anarchy here as they have done in Ireland and Mexico and Spain and wherever there are any people who want to be free. 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chiniquy. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. C-I-N-I-Q-U-Y. Not too old either, 1968. This is Samuel Morse, known for the Morse Code. The author undertakes to show that a conspiracy against the liberties of this republic is now in full action under the direction of the wily Prince of Metternich of Austria. Apparently we had a problem with Austria about this time. Who, knowing the impossibility of obliterating this troublesome example of a great and free nation, that's the United States, by force of arms, is attempting to accomplish his object through the agency of an army of Jesuits. The array of facts and arguments going to prove the existence of such a conspiracy will astonish any man who opens the book with the same incredulity as we do. Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, Samuel Morse, 1835. Now, Hitler had some interesting comments. This is also, you can find online. Hitler said, "I learned much from the Order of the Jesuits. Until now, there has never been anything more grandiose on the earth than the hierarchical system of the Catholic Church. I transferred much of this organization into my own party. The SS was constituted according to the Jesuit principles. Himmler, head of the SS, was closely associated with the Jesuits through his father and his brother. They were both Catholics. Hitler said of him, I can see Himmler as our Ignatius of Loyola." Remember, he's the founder of the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order was founded, and I actually have the below here. The Jesuit order was founded August 15, 1535 by the Spaniard Ignatius Loyola and sanctioned by Pope Paul III, September 27, 1540. Now let's get into something we're more familiar with, the Masons. Now remember, my grandfather was a Mason. Remember, on the lower levels, we're dealing with one thing. But when you get to the higher level of the Masonic Lodge, you have another. A Masonic Lodge will have a Bible or a Quran or whatever book is the religion for that location in the front lobby, because they want to recruit people. But once you become a higher level, you must accept the philosophy that the inner circle accepts, which is theosophy or Luciferianism. Right? You'll be surprised who's a high-level Mason. Let's read about them. From the book The Grand Design Exposed, John Daniel, 1999. Recent book, easy to find probably. The truth is, the Jesuits of Rome have perfected Freemasonry to be their most magnificent and effective tool, accomplishing their purposes among Protestants. In the Masonic quiz book, the question is asked, who was Nimrod? The answer is he was son of Cush, and the old Constitution referred to as one of the founders of Masonry, and in the scriptures of the architect of many cities. Now this is interesting. And the reason I have this here is that Nimrod was the original sun god. I believe he also was a big player in building the Tower of Babel, where we get Babylon. Nimrod died. His wife claimed that his spirit went to the sun. She got pregnant and claimed that the spirit of Nimrod came and got her pregnant, and then she had a virgin birth. Well, not virgin, but I guess immaculate conception. I don't know if that would apply. She had her son because her dead husband came back from the sun, S-U-N, and so now she has a son, S-O-N. That was the original pagan trinity. The sun god Nimrod, the wife on earth, and the child. Just like Egypt's Isis, Horus, Set. And you see that now in Catholicism. Mary is up front and prominent. They claim that you cannot have salvation without Mary. So Mary, the child, and the Father. In the York manuscript find, at the Tower of Babel there was masonry first much esteemed of, and Nimrod was a mason himself and loved well masons. John T. Lawrence, The Perfect Ashlar. A lot of these are masons. We're getting into a lot of books now that are actually written by masons. They're proud of their heritage. The first one was William O. Peterson, editor, Masonic Quiz Book, Ask Me Another, Brother. All right. General Ritchie and Adam Weishaupt were two Jesuits who were key players in creating the Masons. You see, what had happened was the Jesuits were so militant when they first got started that they were actually getting kicked out of nations because of their behavior. They were killing people, they were just creating all kinds of chaos. They were getting a lot of pushback. So there was a time period when the Jesuit order was struggling. And during that struggle is when they got the bright idea, well, let's just create the Illuminati. It's a different name. I mean, how many times have you seen the same company go bankrupt and then start with a new name, right? So General Ritchie and Adam Weishaupt. This is a quote from History of the Jesuits, Their Origin, Progress, Doctrines, and Designs by G.B. Niccolini. During the order's suppression from 1773 to 1814 by Pope Clement XIV, General Ritchie created the Illuminati with his soldier Adam Weishaupt, the father of modern communism. That's really interesting. Now, anybody recognize this guy?
Yeah.
Well, I give it away because his name is at the bottom. Harry Truman. Harry Truman. His quote, and this is from the website www.famousmasons.com. Although I hold the highest civil honor in the world, he was our president, I have always regarded my rank and title as a past Grand Master of Masons the greatest honor that had ever come to me. Remember, at the high level, you're a Luciferian.
It's almost what George Washington said.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Basically the same thing.
Yeah, let's look at some more things. You're right, spot on. Oh yeah. So Harry Truman in his regalia, okay? I've seen the actual photograph. This is a painting off of that photograph, or a similar one. Masonry, famous Masons. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry Truman, we just saw, Warren Harding, Taft, Roosevelt, Theodore, McKinley, Garfield. That's just a sampling. All high-ranking Masons. Now, Gerald Ford, from what I understand, when he would sign something, it would be Gerald Ford, number 33. That was not his number when he played football. He was a 33 honorary member of the Masonic movement. Let's look at some other very interesting high-ranking Masons. Bill Clinton, 33. Newt Gingrich, 33. Bob Dole, Jack Kent, Storm Thurmond, Al Gore, Colin Powell, who just recently passed away, Jesse Helms, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Skull and Bones, which is just a reincarnation of the Masonic movement, just a little more creepy. King Hussein. Notice the dichotomy: left, right, and foreign, ostensibly enemies. Remember, the dialectic thinking. Control both paradigms. King Hussein, Yitzhak Rabin, I think that is a Jewish president if I'm remembering correctly. Yasser Arafat, what country was that? Wasn't that Libya? Or was that Syria? Ostensibly an enemy, but remember, this is a club where the alliance is within the club. John Glenn, Buzz Aldrin, Jimmy Carter was in the Trilateral Commission, which is just a derivative of these movements. David Rockefeller, Czar of the Illuminati. Hillary Clinton, Sixth Degree Grand Dame. That's the female version of the Illuminati. Albert Pike, who wrote Morals and Dogmas, the Bible for the Masonic movement. We're going to hear a lot from him in just a minute. He founded the Ku Klux Klan. Ted Kennedy, Prince Philip, Tony Blair, Saddam Hussein. Remember, the oath is to do whatever you need to do, even if you have to sacrifice yourself or your family or murder or whatever. And there's a reason for this. They have a very strange religion. In theosophy, and I may not have all the specific details perfect, but generally speaking, They believe that Lucifer is going to usher in 1,000 years of peace on earth. They believe it's Lucifer that was right and not Christ. They believe that they must homogenize this world and bring in a new world order before Lucifer will take control and usher in that millennia of peace. This is why we see the movement towards a new world order. Remember George Bush, the first president? 1,000 points of light. It's a reference to the Illuminati. You see, they out in the open give signals to each other. The hidden hand. How often do we see the hidden hand? Yeah, that's Masonic. The handshake where the thumb is down over the hand. You'll see that frequently. Yeah.
There's many degrees of handshakes.
The 3 sixes, which is also the eye of the Egyptian god.
And,
Yeah, there's a number of symbols, and you'll see this frequently. And it's interesting, you can watch a news clip, and you'll see somebody like Fosse, who was Jesuit trained, by the way. You'll see somebody like Fosse who will come up stage and he'll do this just for a minute, and then he'll come out. You see, this is the way they communicate, is through symbols.
the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
He was a-
Just wait until you see what's coming up here. Sir Winston Churchill, Benjamin Netanyahu, Vladimir Lenin, it goes on and on and on. I had to stop. I didn't have all night. Hoover, head of the FBI, 33-degree Mason. Steve Wozniak, Apple. John Wayne, Brad Pitt with the Masonic ring on his hand. Jesse Jackson, claiming to be a Christian reverend. Remember, to be a high-ranking Mason, you have to be a Luciferian. Albert Pike, in a letter that he wrote to Mazzini, dated August 15, 1871, in which he outlined plans for 3 world wars that were seen as necessary to bring about the one world order. For a short time, this letter was on display in British Museum. I misspoke earlier. The oath you can find, it was not displayed. It was this letter that was displayed in the British Museum Library in London, and it was copied by William Guy Carr, former intelligence officer in the Royal Canadian Navy. There's also other sources for this plan. This just happens to be the one that I have on the slide. The First World War was to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia, who were protecting Christian orthodoxy, and to bring about an atheistic communist state. You see, they're setting up theses versus antitheses. So they get rid of those who are protecting Christian orthodoxy to set up an atheistic communist paradigm. The Second World War, to originate between Great Britain and Germany to strengthen the communism as antithesis to the Judeo-Christian culture and bring about a Zionist state in Israel. Check, they accomplished all that. Israel came to be, what was it, 1948, I think? Right after that war, and it created this paradigm. It strengthened Russia immensely. They came out very powerful after World War II, just like we did. As a matter of fact, they owned half of Europe, didn't they? Eastern Europe. The Third World War, which is most interesting and familiar to us, a Middle Eastern war involving Judaism and Islam and spreading internationally. Are we seeing that? Absolutely. Absolutely. Doc Marquis, Secrets of the Illuminati. There's his website. Mazzini with Pike developed a plan for 3 world wars so that eventually every nation would be willing to surrender its national sovereignty to the world government. Is that the trend? Oh, most notably. Our country's selling out. What does the UN want? What do other nations want? What does China want? We'll do that. Right? That's the trend. Let's read on. The First War was to end the Tsarist regime in Russia. The Second War was to allow the Soviet Union to control Europe. The Third World War was to be in the Middle East between Muslims and Jews and would result in Armageddon. We haven't quite gotten to that yet. That's their objective. right? Whether that is what facilitates certain events in the future or not is up to God. But that was their objective. They accomplished their goals up to that point. This is from the book The Fourth Reich of the Rich, authored by Griffin, referring to the same aforementioned letter that was in the British Museum. We shall unleash, this is part of that letter, we shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism. Notice the pendulum swing. Origin of savagery and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the minority of the revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, will receive the pure light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. The destruction of Christianity and atheism. So you see, they want to destroy Christianity, which they basically have almost, right? Christianity does not reflect God's will generally. It is infiltrated by Eastern religion. That's where you get the contemplative prayer, where they visualize colors and shapes. That's from Eastern meditation. That's from transcendental meditation. Nowhere in the Bible does God say, I want you to visualize a color and a shape. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, I want you to empty your mind. It says, no, I want you to be full of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. This is all Eastern meditation stuff, but it is filtered into our churches. Every church this is filtered into. Among other things. The list goes on and on and on. These church services where everybody is so zombie-like in this contemplative music that just goes on forever and ever and ever. That's mindless participation in a form of Eastern meditation. It's spiritualism. We saw a photo last night of one of Benny Hinn's meetings where people are just laid out on the floor. The Bible makes it clear God is not a God of chaos. They call it slain in the spirit. Show me the scripture, please. So we have the eye on the dollar. How many times have we seen that in Hollywood, huh? The one eye.
Yeah.
Over and over again. We see it all the time. Yep, this, be quiet, it's a secret. 3 sixes and the one eye, etc., etc. It just goes on and on and on. You see, we're entrenched in the Masonic movement. We're entrenched in the Jesuit-controlled secret society movements. And who controls those Jesuits? The Vatican. Sometimes, actually, it's the other way around. Here's just a sampling. Justin Bieber, Lady Gaga, Jackie Chan, the guy from Titanic, forget his name. Guy from the pirate movies, forget his name. Emmett Watson from Harry Potter, there's no surprise there. Notice the common thing. The one eye, the 3 sixes. Right? Common motif. Rappers always doing that stuff. They always have the symbology in their rings on their coats. This is the female minority version of the Masonic movement. Notice the inverted pentagram. This is a satanic symbol. You find it on death metal rock and roll albums and stuff like that. You find witches wearing those symbols. If you see one of these things on the back of the car, they're into Wiccan or witchcraft of some form. It's usually black, however, and it usually looks like that.
What is on there?
This is, I'm not sure what those 5 symbols mean, but this is a pentagram. This is the goat. It represents Satan. Now, this is Baphomet. And yes, the 2 fingers, you'll see the Pope frequently do that too. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of statues where Jesus and the Mother Mary, they'll have a statue and they're both holding their finger up like that. Okay, so you see how they overlap. All right? Now, this is an androgynous figure usually. It represents both the white and the black, the male and the female deity. It usually has breasts and an erection. In this case, it's just got the erection. To make matters worse, it's got two little children looking up to him. Notice the sun symbol with the pentagram behind the head. All right, see how it's coming together? Beyonce has that symbol all over what she does. She sort of integrated it into her costume. Now the name Sasha Fierce, she says, is a spirit that takes over when she's on stage.
It's also
It's spiritualism.
It's also used in blanking my mind right now, but I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's used in a lot of things. You'll see this everywhere, right? Now, a star is a star is a star sometimes, right? We can't freak out over every little symbol we see. But when you look at it in context and you look for certain features, we've got this goat, which represents the Satan, represents the scapegoat. Remember, in the end, there will be the sheep and the goats, the saved and the lost. The goat represents Satan by and large in most of this symbology. Notice the queen's nurse, Masonic symbol, and the pentagram. You see, they're everywhere. Like the title says, they control everything. The Freemasons of the United States have, by tacit consent, referred to it, that is the pentagram, the context is they're talking about the symbology, as a symbol of the 5 points of fellowship. This is the Freemasons that are controlled by the Jesuits, founded by the Jesuits. This is them talking. The outlines of the 5-pointed star are the same as those of the Pentalpha or Pythagoras. This is the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. In the science of magic, the Pentalpha is called Holy and Mysterious Pentagram. The pentagram in the star of Magians. By virtue of the number 5, it has great command over evil spirits, ostensibly. They're in the occult, they're into spiritism, so they think these things are real. Satan, in his wisdom, makes it look real to deceive people. Remember, Satan can give the disease and he can take it away. Job teaches that, right? So he can perform miracles. By virtue of the number 5, it has great command over the spirits, ostensibly, because of its 5 double triangles and its 5 acute angles within its 5 obtuse angles without. So that this interior pentangle contains in it many great mysteries. This is what the Masons believe, who are controlled by the Jesuits, which is a Catholic organization. You see how it's all tied together. They control everything. Dictionary of Mysticism. Considered by the occultists to be the most potent of means of conjuring spirits. So you see this symbol plastered everywhere. They're into spiritism. When a single point of the star points upward, it is regarded as the sign of the good and a means to conjure benevolent spirits. When the single point points down and a pair of points are on top, it is a sign of the evil or Satan, and is used to conjure the power of evil. Listen, if you're dealing with Satan's angels, there's no such thing as good spirits and bad spirits. They're all evil, but they're playing the game. Remember, dialectic thinking. Red team, blue team. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Astrology, according to the Jesuits, this is the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Astrology is a science demanding the respect of the scholar, notwithstanding its design as a black art, and in a reflective sense and an occult science. This science was known to the ancients as the divine art. But how many people open up the newspaper and go, oh, I wonder what the horoscope says today? They don't know what they're playing with. They have no idea they're playing with Satanism. The next 3 quotes are from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Those brethren who delight to trace our emblems to an astronomical origin find in the compass a symbol of the sun and circular pivot, representing the body of the luminary and the diverging legs of his rays. They're all infatuated with this symbology and the sun and sun worship, and of course Lucifer, because sun worship is his system. From that science, that is astrology, that's the context of this quote, many of our most significant emblems are borrowed. The lodge itself is a representation of the world. It is adorned with the images of the sun and the moon and the stars. Hardly any of the symbols of Freemasonry are more important in their significance or more extensive in their application than the sun. The sun, too, as the regenerator and reviver of all things, is a phallic worship. Do I need to explain the word phallic?
Yeah.
Penis.
Oh.
It's phallic worship. You'll notice the obelisk in the middle of the Vatican Square. Same thing as the Washington Monument. Its roots are in penis worship. The polite way to put it is phallic worship. Because you got to remember that all those pagan sun-worshipping cults and kingdoms, sex orgies were part of the worship process. You see, remember there's the god Ishtar. With the god Ishtar, rabbits and eggs were symbols of fertility. Ishtar, Easter, eggs, and rabbits. In Ezekiel 8, we'll move out of what we were just looking at into something that reflects on last night. This is God talking to Ezekiel. He shows Ezekiel a number of things that are very upsetting to him, that the ancient Israel are doing in defiance of God's commands, and he's going through this list of things. He's saying, see what they're doing? That's a problem. See what they're doing? That's a problem. But then he ends up addressing the thing that bothers him the most. And that's where we'll pick it up. Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations. He's already shown him several. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, that's into the temple. And behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, there between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs towards the temple of the Lord, and their faces towards the east. And they worshiped the sun towards the east. You see, that is the greatest abomination, is idol worship. And God knows Satan uses the sun as a symbol of his authority. It was the greatest abomination then, and do you think Satan dropped it in the meantime? No, we saw the history of how sun worship just kept going and going and going, and now you look at any Roman Catholic art, and it's still going. Right? That's the greatest abomination to God, is idol worship, and specifically that one idol that is most important to Satan, worship of the sun. Now, in case you might think it's dead, and this is all ancient history, and that, it's a different church now, they've changed, it's not the same. Well, here's the website, religionnews.com. It's I'm not sure that it's just Catholic, but I think it's Catholic control. Nevertheless, we have this guy here, Thomas Rees, who in an article had the following to say. COVID-19 and global warming are enough to make me long for the days of clerical power and Catholic guilt. In those good, bad old days, the church's hierarchy was able to issue thunderous edicts, and most Catholics would follow its directions like sheep. If the laity did not, they would feel guilty and fear going to hell, and they would also get burned at the stake. The church used to have the power to make and break kings. There's an honest statement. Remember, Thomas Rees is a Jesuit. And he's revealing a lot of information, but in today's ignorance, in most cultures and in most groups, they would not catch any of this. The church used to have the power to make and break kings, the power to shape cultures and command people's actions. Too bad it does not have such power to save humanity from itself today. Would that the Pope could declare vaccine skeptics and climate change deniers heretics and put their books, articles, Facebook pages, and tweets on the index of forbidden books.
Wow, vaccines.
That's very current. Very current.
Jesuit.
That's no old church. That's no old attitude. That's not the comment for something that has changed. It's alive and well, and it's getting more and more so because they're getting more and more bold, because American Protestants have forgotten why the Pilgrims got on the boat to go to the United States. It wasn't the United States then, it was the New World. They've forgotten all that, and now they want to embrace.
Yeah.
That's what the ecumenical movement is all about. Would that the Pope declare, and I already read that, nothing would give me more illicit pleasure than having the governors of Florida and Texas, along with the leaders of the oil and coal industries, excommunicated, just as kings and nobles were excommunicated in the past. That's quite a revealing statement.
That's amazing.
Quite a revealing statement. Now this is Pope Francis Laudato Si. I think this was, 2014, 2015 when he did this? And he's pushing it hard. He is pushing it hard. As a matter of fact, on the 22nd, didn't he go to COP 20-something or another, that whole climate change thing? I'm interested to see what came out of that. Because they're pushing for Climate Sunday, to shut things down on Sunday.
Isn't he a Jesuit?
Oh yeah, he's our first Jesuit Pope.
Yeah.
See, things are wrapping up quickly. Jesus said, it's going to move. From his encyclical, Sunday like the Jewish Sabbath. Now it's a lie. There's no such thing as a Jewish Sabbath. There's only God's Sabbath. But his narrative is structured a certain way. Is meant to be a day which heals our relationships with God. That's true. The Sabbath is meant to enrich our relationship with God, with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Okay. The context, he's talking about Sunday. It, that is Sunday, protects human action from becoming empty activism. It, that is Sunday, also prevents that unfettered greed and sense of isolation make us seek personal gain to the detriment of all else. The law of weekly rest forbade work on the seventh day. Exodus 32, that's true. Rest opens our eyes to a larger picture and gives us renewed sensitivity to the rights of others. You notice the common good is a common theme. This country was founded on the rights of the individual. Subtle. It's very subtle because we think, oh yeah, we want to do what's right for everybody else. And from a Christian perspective, we should do what is good for everybody. We should treat others as we would like to be treated. Here's the thing. The narrative is structured in such a way that if we choose to stand for what is right, in opposition to what the masses believe what is right, we're in violation of this paradigm, this narrative, which is for the common good. So anybody who wants to stand on God's commandments and keep the Sabbath and not give in to the coming Sunday law, which they're pushing hard, will look as someone, you're not interested in the common good. We're shutting everything down for the sake of the common good. We're demanding worship so we can appease God, and you're in violation of that. See how the narrative is being painted? Rest opens our eyes to the larger picture and gives us renewed sensitivity to the rights of others. We should love our brother. Can you see the narrative? And so the day of rest centered on the Eucharist. They always have to drag the Eucharist back in. Why? It's a symbol of the sun. Sheds its light on the whole week. Oh, I love that little play on words. Sheds its light. But anyway, maybe that's too much. And motivates us to greater concern for nature and the poor.
Oh, wow.
Also from his encyclical. Public authorities have the duty to ensure that for reasons of economic productivity, citizens are not denied time for rest and divine worship. Employers have an analogous obligation regarding their employees. Christians, in respect of religious freedom and of the common good of all should seek to have Sundays and the church's holy days recognized as legal holidays. We read this last night. But you can see how it's all fitting together. They control everything. And it's just a matter of shaping things so that the masses say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do that. That's all they're doing, is they're shaping things. Remember the Jesuit oath. Remember the Hegelian philosophy. You control both sides and you shape it. Now remember what happened after 9/11? I remember I was in Jacksonville, Florida. We were getting ready to put some computer code together to fly to somewhere in Europe to install it. We had several people from many nations who would gather in one place, and this happened to be Jacksonville, Florida. We're sitting there, we're just typing away, putting in this code, getting ready to go to Europe. And one of the women said, hey, an airplane just ran into one of the buildings in New York. Now after that, suddenly there was this surge of people, Americans, running to the church. Why? They felt threatened. They felt unsafe. There was a surge of national pride. We need to get back to God. And blowing up those two towers was minor compared to what's coming. Because when we have a collapse, when we have a major event, people are going to run to God out of fear. And they're going to demand action be taken to appease God. I know that sounds bizarre, but there's going to be so much fear. Keep this in mind. What is taking place? Hundreds of thousands are coming over our border unchecked from many nations. China is becoming prominent, and from what I just read, they're testing nuclear weapons in suborbits. The stage is being set for a major event in which the masses will say, we need God and we demand that you legislate us back into submission to God, because people are sensitive to the fact that this country is not what it used to be. We've lost our way. But you see, here's the thing, you cannot legislate loyalty to God. Legislating religion always leads to a bad ending. But they're already demanding it. They tried to do it in 1888 with the Lord's Day Alliance, under the Blair Education Bill. They've been pushing for it for the last several decades hard. And one major event, what if one of these people that comes over the border happens to blow up a city? Every single American will be clamoring to get back in the church, just like they did in 9/11, and that was a relatively minor event. Let's read on. Christians, in respect to religious freedom and common good of all, should seek to have Sundays and church holy days recognized as holidays. We've read that. We've already reviewed the fact that they're pushing through Climate Sunday and other movements. That's why the Pope is so involved in climate. He's considered the leader in the climate change movement. Brilliant, if you think about it, because that brings atheists under his sphere of control. Because they're concerned about the world too. They don't care about God so much, but they're concerned about the world. Wall Street Journal, they have their nose in this. What we have lost, rejecting the Sabbath, setting aside one day a week for rest and prayer used to be an American tradition. In an age of constant activity, we need it more than ever. What is the Wall Street Journal doing in religion? Conclusions. Behind the scenes, the beast that is the Vatican is using clandestine organizations to control governance, business, and entertainment to shape the world. I gave you just a sprinkling of the quotes and images I could have had here, but we only have 1 hour. The Jesuit Initiate Vow includes the commitment that any violence and deception deemed necessary, regardless of extreme, will be committed in order to achieve the goal of bringing the Pope into total control of the earth and to wipe out Protestantism. I should structure my own sentences more carefully. They control everything through these organizations, and we just touched it You know, I always end with this, and I know I repeat myself frequently. The fact is we need to get our lives right with God. We need to consider what Jesus did for us on the cross. We need to consider how he suffered to redeem us back to God. There is only one path back to the Father, and that's through Jesus Christ and him crucified. It's not through Mary. It's not through our own merits. It's not through any particular church. It's not through another man at all. It is only through Jesus Christ. Without him, we have no hope. His blood was shed so that we could have life.
Yeah.
And all this stuff we talked about tonight is meaningless without that man's character lived through us. We must have Jesus. Otherwise, we are lost. We must have Jesus. Now, if you want an exhaustive study on this, and it's on the handout, go to YouTube and Google Walter Veith, The Secret Behind the Secret Societies, or Walter Veith, Hidden Agendas, Walter Veith, Revolutions, Tyrants, and Wars. He does an in-depth study, and between these 3 videos, you'll get between 5 and 6 hours of very close study on the subject. And he just steps back and reads the quotes. He doesn't give you opinion very often. He just says, this is what they say. This is what they say. This is what they did. This is where they were. This is what they blew up. This is who they killed. And he uses news clips and quotes from the source. Remember the oath. It didn't matter what their rank was. It didn't matter what their position was. You see, Kennedy, before he was elected or just after, he was questioned about his Catholicism because you see, even in the early 60s, there was still a little bit of Protestantism still alive.
Yeah.
They remembered, there were still some people that were still around that remembered, there was a reason why the Pilgrims came here. And so they questioned him, well, what about your allegiance to the Vatican? And Kennedy said something to the effect, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect that the Roman Catholic Church will have nothing to do with my administration. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the bottom line of what he said. He later said, I'm going to dismantle the Federal Reserve. We never got into that, but they control that. The Federal Reserve is a private organization. It's not federal. And he was going to dismantle the CIA. By the way, we talked about the FBI and Edgar Hoover. The CIA was started by, guess who? A Jesuit. We have a Supreme Court that is mostly Catholic. Most of our leading government officials are Catholic, and this was a Protestant nation. The stage is set. The dominoes are about to fall. You can see the whole series, which is called Total Onslaught, at adtv.watch/series/total-onslaught. It's on the handout. I recommend the whole series, but if you just want to review the content from tonight, those 3 videos, which are about 1.5 to 2 hours each, will blow your mind. I only gave you a taste. Our next meeting is entitled Dead and Buried. Let's bow our heads. Gracious Father, it's true that Satan thinks through his agents that he has control. And it sure looks that way. But I know that you have total control. And I know that you are only allowing these things to happen to demonstrate to the world the results of rebellion against you and the results of serving a God other than you. Please give us wisdom. Please give us the integrity to do what is right. Please give us the courage to stand for the principles you want us to stand for, even if we are the only one in the room. Even if we look like freaks to the rest of the world, even if we look like traitors, even if we look like the problem, give us the courage to do what is right in your eyes. Father, please take everybody home safely tonight. Bring them back next week as well. In Jesus' name.